Hello, and welcome to another episode of What's Up with Startups. I'm Emin Askerov, and today with me is Iwood Luberman, Head of Product of LeydenJar, a company that revolutionizes energy storage with its 100% silicon anode. So, Iwood, hi. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Emin, and it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great. So, first of all, let me remind people and our listeners that in this show, we're not going to specifics of the technology, although we will take a time
Mhm.
to explore that. But what I'm most interested in and what I think is lacking in the climate tech scene are insights of people, founders of people working for clean tech startups about how you scale the clean technologies. I mean, we have all of the technologies we need to avert the climate change. Now, the problem is getting them to scale where that matters. And what I found especially spectacular about LeydenJar is that, I mean, people talk about solid state batteries for, they have been talking of solid state batteries like, I don't know, for 10 years now, I think.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
longer.
long time. And it's hailed like as the next breakthrough in battery technology that will make batteries cheap and abundant. However, that's been a long time coming. Now, you are the company that is going big on this, and you are building a first of a kind factory to manufacture your anodes. So please, for those who do not know about LeydenJar, could you briefly describe what the company product is and what your business is?
Yeah, for sure. I'd be happy to. So when you think about when you think about batteries, people think about residential energy storage, about electric vehicles, but of course also on the battery that's inside your smartphone, right? The thing that people actually don't often think about is what's actually in that battery. Well, let me tell you, it's an anode, a cathode, and some electrolyte to make the ions move between that anode and the cathode. So all batteries you see around you are basically layers or stacks or wound cylindrical cells of anodes and cathodes. People have been making anodes since the early 90s already from copper foil, which is coated with graphite. However, already since the dawn of lithium-ion batteries, people have known that silicon actually is an awesome material instead of graphite to make these anodes from. For the simple reason that silicon has the fundamental material property that it can host 10x more ions in a gram of material. Well, that's awesome, you'd say, because then you can make your anode a lot thinner. As a consequence, you can make your battery a lot thinner, and you can improve the energy density of the battery. So that is why LeydenJar is alive. Our company is alive because we enable batteries with a super high energy density. Well, let me tell you why that matters and why that's difficult.
Sure.
Why does it matter to have a battery with a super high energy density? Well, basically, because it allows you to put more batteries in a liter or more batteries in a kilogram of battery. So it allows you where your typical electric vehicle maybe nowadays packs 70 kilowatt hours of charge. Using our battery technology, you could boost that number with anywhere between 50 and 100%. Well, as a consequence, it would allow your electric vehicle to drive faster. Or what also could be super interesting, it would allow your electric vehicle to have a smaller battery and thus save cost. Well, the same analogy goes up for smart devices. Well, anything from wearables to smartphones. It allows your battery to become smaller, or it would allow your device to last longer. For me, in the context of the energy transition, the most tantalizing example, though, is what would happen if you would have this super light, energy dense battery and you put it in an airplane. We feel that LeydenJar battery technology is uniquely positioned in the long term because there's 100 barriers to cross before we can get this done. But in the long term, we feel that LeydenJar batteries can be uniquely enabling to electrify big segments of regional air flights. And that's exciting to work on, Emin.
Okay, and okay, that's great. And this this is a this definitely sounds like the kind of battery technology that the market been waiting for. But let's talk a little before we talk about the challenges of bringing that to market. Tell me, what motivated the founding team to start the business, and when was that? How long you've been in the game?
So I have joined LeydenJar back in 2021. So that's no 2020 already. So that's getting close to 5 years I've been in the team. But the company itself was actually founded back in 2016 as a spin-out company from a Dutch fundamental research organization called TNO. Um, Back at the time, people were researching novel ways to produce solar cells using a novel production procedure to produce these solar cells. The thing was that failed horribly because what ended up was that instead of a nice dense layer of silicon, they'd ended up making super porous silicon. And then
Okay.
there was one, well, who I'd call a semi-genius. That guy is called Wim Sopham, the inventor of our technology, who realized at that time that a very shitty solar material could perhaps dub as a very promising battery material. Well, at that point in time, the fundamental research organization said, awesome, super interesting. They patented it, but now let's find an entrepreneur who can take this to the next level. So that's the point where our founder, Christian, together with his co-founder, Gabe, stepped in and took a swing at it and tried to build a company at it. And um, they've been going at it for 9 years now.
All right. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's an interesting story when you get like a cross pollination of from other
Yeah.
uh, climate technologies. So let's get back to what you said about the target, say for the LeydenJar. It's like then you say you can make you aim to make a super light battery that ideally would fit, say, an electric airplane. Now, before you go to electric airplane, who are the customers you are talking to? Maybe you already have a customer. Can you tell a little bit about that? So how you get them and what is the main challenge of convincing the customer to go for these? I wouldn't say it's like a completely new technology. I mean, from what I know about battery tech, it still uses the same kind of ideas and the same sandwich style manufacturing, but any kind of innovation that significantly kind of deviates from what the traditional battery technology is usually met by a customer with a
Oh, yeah,
bit of skepticism. So tell us
for
about the
sure.
customer. Yeah,
I mean, and we're not the only ones out there, right, that claim to have
sure.
revolutionary new battery technology. There's dozens of startups, and for a good reason, because the problem is so darn big that tons of people are trying to fix this. So we are unique in the way we approach trying to fix the problem. Well, then there's many layers to your question, I mean. So I'm debating a little bit on how to get started here. So how do we approach? So who are our customers? Well, the tricky thing about building a company is that you engage in NDAs, and we're not at liberty to say a lot about who our customers are. But we are in the design-in phase with most notably one consumer electronic giant, one of the biggest out there. Um, Trying to get this designed into their line of products. But obviously, we're also talking to, I'd say, the bulk of the big automotives out there to try and convince them that this revolutionary battery technology is good for their products. Then how does that sales funnel work? Interestingly enough, I mean, we're a small team, right? We're about 70 people, mostly focused on R&D, product development, and scaling up the production technology that we have. We don't have a big sales and marketing budget, nor do we have a big sales and marketing team, nor do I really feel that we need to. Because honestly, if I take a look at our top 5 client engagements, all of them approached us. No. 3 or 4 out of 5 approached us through our general company email address. So
Mm.
as I said, the thing about battery industry, it's not a niche. And if you are a car manufacturer, you end up spending 30 to 40% of your cost of goods on your battery supplier. If you are a smartphone manufacturer, end of the day, 20 or 30% of all the real estate in your device goes to your battery. So these people, they have massive, all of them have big tech scout teams. So all we have to do is spread the word and do podcasts like this, Emin.
Okay.
No, but then
So,
of course the challenge is, and I believe that was the second part of your question. Then the big challenge is not getting in contact with the clients, but well, one, convincing them that our battery is fully up to spec, and it is a product that's developing, that's not ready off the shelf. It's convincing the clients that they need to co-invest in getting this production up to speed, but also convincing them that the design in process is very manageable. And I think you mentioned it. I mean that we do make use of the same sandwich, is what you called it,
mhm.
of the traditional battery industry. So we use the same cathode, we use the same electrolyte. We only change the anode, and but still the design in process to make batteries out of that at scale, where parts per million failure make all the difference, is a big challenge. So we need to partner up with our end clients to get that done.
And in the light of conversations that's been recently quite heard on in the community, in the cleantech community around the world, about scaling up and the challenges of building like first of a kind factories, when you hear like the advice or uh, any kind of advice like given by, say, venture capital companies, what they say, okay, before scaling up, you have to secure like your offtake. And
Oh
in
yeah,
the battery industry, like offtake is the holy grail. I mean,
yeah,
it, it doesn't help you to actually scale up, as we've seen, like say from the Northvolt case. They had all the optics they need. They still couldn't do it. So, but it's still a kind of a prerequisite. It viewed as a kind of prerequisite to start, construction. Now, what I know from about LeydenJar is that you already started a construction of your. I we will get a little bit later to the point to the question whether it's like a first of a kind or if it's like your demo project. But you're already in the construction of a
yeah.
factory or a demo of a factory that will utilize the machinery of your own design that will make your anode. Now, would that not require some commitment from the customer? Or are you okay doing without it?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been super fortunate that we've had a series of venture capital investors, but also a range of other stakeholders to believe in the technology and the company, to allow us to really do this simultaneously, to develop the product, engage with clients, but also start scaling up. And I do believe that this is essential because the time it takes to develop a completely novel production technology. So we use a plasma deposition technology to make these anodes, and then simultaneously industrialize that process, um, get the maintenance procedures right, get the uptime and the yield figures on par. That takes many, many years, and the amount of expertise and funding that you need for that. So I have always argued that if you want to do these things in series, you'd always be too late, and you'd be running after the fact. So some sort of, to some degree, a parallelism in that is almost unavoidable. But it does beg the question, that you stated, that all the startups in the space are now looking at offtake agreements as the holy grail, and that's how we look at it a little bit as well. Because for sure, having signed offtake agreements unlocks additional funding. And you're also right in pointing out that the recent Northvolt case has also brought some realism to that statement that even that mass manufacturing is just incredibly difficult, and that client traction is the only, well, if the client commits the offtake for the wrong reasons, be it geopolitical de-risking, instead of really buying into the technological maturity of the team and the process at hand, then accidents can still occur, and we've all suffered from that, right? It's clear to see that right now it's not easy in the clean tech fundraising space, and we've seen many battery companies struggle as a consequence. And I'm convinced that there's already a stream of bankruptcies happening as we speak, and this is going to get worse in the next 6 months. That's for sure.
And how LeydenJar would specifically avoid that, because I don't have this. Either you go through how you convince investors. I mean, if you don't have an offtake, then and you have, as you said, you have several VC investors, but I also saw that you have like some budget money. I mean, like some EU money financing you as well.
Yeah.
So, what convinces them that, okay, let's fund LeydenJar? They're gonna build this new factory to make these anodes, which nobody ever did before, even if they don't have an offtake.
No, but I do argue that it's not as black and white as having an offtake or not having an offtake. And even the definition of what it means to have an offtake is very blurry of itself. So what we do is we have a funnel of clients, and we discuss that funnel in detail with our investors. And some of our investors are seasoned in the battery industry, have invested in dozens of other battery companies, and they're able to evaluate the traction that we have with our clients and benchmark that against competitors. Well, the way any engagement always starts off is with an introduction and an NDA, and then after some point say, hey, send me a sample. Then you send them a few samples, and then the first step is claims validation. And believe it or not, what we hear from our clients is that this is where the mass actually fails, where people put out press releases of having achieved specific specs. But then when the client says, hey, send me a sample, and they want to redo that in their own lab, many battery startups don't achieve these specs. So step one is claims verification and being honest about what you claim. After the sampling phase, you often engage in joint development agreements. And a joint development agreement then stipulates that you tweak the specs of the technology that you've developed to really be a glove-like fit to the application at hand. So this is where you target all the secondary battery specs. So you got your energy density, you got your cycle life, you got your fast charging performance, but of course you also have your calendar life or your high temperature performance or your low temperature performance. It's like that. So that's what you do in the joint development phase. Then, as a fourth leg in the commercial pipeline, you would start to discuss the design-in process. This is where the client has validated that you are able to achieve all the specs that they're looking for, but be it an automotive OEM or whatever, they say, hey, can you produce this at scale? And you know what? We're going to introduce you to our contract manufacturer. And that's the case in LeydenJar. We only supply the anodes. Somebody else is going to have to make the battery out of that. So we're going to introduce you to our contract manufacturer and start shipping them kilometers of foil, of anode foil, to see if this is manufacturable, if the yields are okay, if the cost prices are okay, etc. And only, I would say, in a healthy commercial process, and I'm not sure if this is what happened in the Northvolt case, but in a healthy process, you've gone through all of these steps before signing an offtake agreement. And of course, it's easy to sign a conditional offtake agreement as a first step, right? That you just go to your client and say, if we have achieved your specs, if we demonstrate to be cost effective, then you promise to buy this and that. But these kinds of offtake agreements don't really hold any true value. It's the thing that we target is the offtake agreement that's unconditional, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have demonstrated to reach all the specs. You
Mm-hmm.
have demonstrated to be able to properly manufacture it at mass scale. And now we are promising to buy this volume at this price. So that's very different. So there's a lot of buzz going around about the word offtake agreement, but I feel that there's also a lot of misinformation on and the term is abused. And you'd have to dive into the contracts, Emin, to really evaluate what's going on.
Yeah, right. This is actually what is fascinating to me because I was on the both ends of offtake agreements myself, and actually once as a Dutch company even, and it's interesting how that evolves, how this work evolves, and how it's applied to battery. And my other offtake agreement was also in the battery industry, with an OE, with an automotive OEM, and it was a conditional one. So it's but also for me it's interesting how that uh, the existence of a kind of offtake agreement, although I don't know, some form of offtake agreement allows you to raise funds for your next step. So in your case, it
Yeah.
appears that a conditional offtake agreement is not necessary because you have the joint development agreements that your investors find that the progress on those agreements is good enough, solid enough to fund your next step.
Yeah.
And that's what I
So
would like to go to get into now is to the next step into this factory that you're building. Can you tell a little bit about it, especially about especially about the size, how you estimate it, how big it should be, and what is the aim, the key objective of this factory?
yeah, sure. Yeah. So when we so production is native to LeydenJar. And at the very second when we got founded back in 2016, we already started doing production on what we started to call the Gen 1 machine. And on this Gen 1 machine, on a good day of production, we would make 3 A4 size sheets of anodes. Well, you'd be able to make a quarter of a smartphone battery with that day's production, and nothing that comes close to an automotive battery, right? I mean, it's so important to wrap your head around the scale that is needed for automotives. That is just absolutely impressive, and it's an amazing target to chase. But that goes into steps. So for us, the first step was this R&D tool that could make us a few sheets of material now and then. In 2020, we were able to acquire a secondhand. We we bought that for a few hundred K. A secondhand plasma cool tool that was actually used back in the day for OLED production, barrier coating films for OLED production. And we completely overhauled that. And this is a massive vacuum deposition tool, right? So think about 7 meters long, 3-4 meters wide. We completely overhauled that tool,
Mhm.
and upgraded, respected. Every nut and bolt of that machine got overhauled. But then I think somewhere around 2021 or 2022, we've been able to demonstrate roll-to-roll production.
Okay.
And this Gen 2 machine, that's still the tool that we operate now on a daily basis. And where we also take our learnings from when it comes to production rhythm, maintainability, yield control, quality control procedures. So right now we produce on a daily basis. And the typical roll that we make is maybe 50 or 100 meters in a day. So that allows us to demonstrate that we can do this, but this is not yet cost effective, right? To have a big tool like that to only produce 100 meters in a day, that's not yet cost effective. So we have started a company that we pretty much risked a project that we pretty much risked the company on, which we called the Gen 3 project, where we have designed a plasma deposition manufacturing tool completely to spec, to fully optimize to the production how we want to use it. So that's all patented, and an engineering team has been working on this for years, and that's an internal team at LeydenJar of dozens of people. But we also do this together with partners in the Netherlands and abroad, where many more dozens of people work on this. And so this Gen 3, this will be the working horse of our future production. And this Gen 3 equipment will get us to cost competitiveness. Well, that Gen 3 is going to have a home, and that's what we call our first factory. And this is going to be in Eindhoven, and we're going to get the keys to that new facility end of this year. So that's pretty exciting. But as I'm sure you can imagine, that there's quite a few steps to take between getting the keys to an empty factory and hitting your productivity milestone. So throughout 2026, we'll be outfitting this facility with all the ancillary equipment, with the HVAC, the heating, the cooling, all that stuff. Then we will be inserting anywhere between 2 and 4 of these Gen 3 production modules, and that's dependent on funding. I mean, even though we're well funded, but there are still limits to what we can do. So, and in that tool, and then let me think. So the production output of that facility will be anywhere between 30 and 70 megawatt hours. So that is mass production when you'd compare it to smartwatch batteries.
Yes.
You'd be able to make 50 million-ish
Yes.
a year. But I mean, it gets you through maybe C sample, D sample stage when you'd be talking about automotive qualification, because automotive is just darn big, darn big batteries. So that's where we are in our scale up trajectory. So we're planning to hit full production mid 2027 in this first facility, but we full well know that if we want to make a dent in the universe in automotive, we'd be talking about plant 2 and plant 3, where we would be targeting 1 gigawatt hour, and in plant 3, 10 gigawatt hour. But scaling up has to go in phases, because we can't finance a factory for 10 gigawatt hours right now. We first have to demonstrate that we can do this on a smaller scale. But the plant 1 is going to be commercially operated.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I wish you best of luck with this, because it is a challenging one. And yeah, thanks for the answering about the scale. And so basically, just to clarify, like this factory will be catering mostly to electronics rather than
Very likely.
automotive.
Very likely, yeah. It has to do with prices. As we scale up, our price points will go down, but it also has to do with profit pools. Smaller batteries yield a bigger profit. So you see it nowadays with everyone. So QuantumScape, CLAM, all the big battery startups, more and more say that, hey, the first stepping stone is consumer electronic batteries, and we take that as a stepping stone to make a dent in the universe in automotive or electrified aircrafts.
And that's joy to hear, because that a lot of companies I know, they just try to immediately go big, and then try to immediately go for the big price of automotive. But now seeing what you do, that you go step by step, you try to
It's
get
one of the
cash flow,
lessons
and
of the current phase that we're in the cleantech sector, right? Where you got to make a profit. And it helps your fundraising efforts if you can show that you made a profit.
Okay. So you grew, I think, LeydenJar grew like from 10 to, you said over 70 people.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, so now you will go even bigger, because like next year, if you commission, you get the factory up and running. So how you go about building up a team? I mean, any kind of, maybe have like some standard vetting procedure for the staff that you hire, or did you have to change something now that you're past R&D stage, almost past R&D stage, and into the manufacturing?
Oh man, 100 things.
maybe then if you can, of course there's other thing, but maybe if you can just focus, say, maybe on a thing that lets you do it better, like following the Pareto principle, like 20% of your efforts giving you 80% of the results. What would you single out?
I would single out, and it's also something that we came late to the conclusion that the DNA of an R&D organization is fundamentally different from the DNA to a production organization. And for us, a pivotal step in that is when we hired a new COO 1.5 years ago. That really made that point out. So when you start a company, and so also when I joined LeydenJar, there were 7 of us. Everything goes. You're living the dream. You're trying to build something that doesn't exist anymore. The future is created by those who are creative, and that's how you build. And I think that's something that every startup out there recognizes. That you build a startup with very creative people. However, the pretty much the worst thing you can do is have a production environment be run by creative people. Um, because a production environment lives and breathes by the virtue of rhythm. And don't do any funny business. Stick to the recipe, stick to the plan, hit your milestones every single day. It should be boring. Like the miniature deviations should stand out and cause a debate. And if you'd have a team in there, which is awesome people who are problem solvers, um, you end up missing out on the fundamental problems that you have, but you also are not very likely to hit these yield milestones that you're looking for. So it's one of the big steps that we've taken in these past few years is that we have a battery lab. And I think the minute when we started saying that, hey, our scientists should not be the guys that run our battery lab, that we got technicians and operators to run the lab, and then the scientists, they work together with them. That's when we started making real stride forwards in how we run our R&D much more like a functioning machine instead of recent PhD grads that have an amazing time together. And that's notwithstanding the essence of this mindset in the early days of a startup. But as you're trying to hit production targets, you need to bring in different DNA.
And how you go about that? I mean, because it's hard. I can imagine that you are. I mean, I work with a Dutch startup, like in wind industry, where they're all very nice people, very creative. But every turbine they would build, every next wind turbine would be different,
Yeah.
slightly. And my task was to make like 600 of the same wind turbines based on their design, and just fixing the design took us, I think, 3 months. Because every time and my team did not know much about wind turbines, but it knew about manufacturing. So when it was
Mm-hmm.
looking at this, and they tried to get this very creative team to, okay, what do we fix? And they would go like, well, maybe this, but maybe then next day they will have some other idea of how to tweak this and that. So
Yeah.
how did you go about finding these people who will change the DNA, and how on earth did you let them?
Well, so that changing DNA in a company has to go top down. There's really no other way, right? You don't change DNA bottom up. So when we hired this new COO, the first thing that had to happen is that we had to take his word for it, and we had to have him be in charge, and that takes a big step from a founder, right? To
Yes.
realize that you are no longer the guy best equipped to make decisions on the daily operations of the factory, um, because you're creative and you're a yes sayer, and our COO is a no sayer. And I think that made all the difference. That really made all the difference. Where you say, hey, I know we can design this better. Answer of the CEO is no, we're not gonna, because it's not important to design it better right now. It's important to design it consistent and to build a track record. So the first step is to have a strong no-sayer and give him the mandate that people follow through. And then I think the thing that I'm happy about is the timing. Well, we've been perhaps slightly early in this culture shift, because there is a so you need to time this correctly. There is a moment in time when you feel that our product development is not done, but hey, newsflash, product development is never done. But when
Mm-hmm.
product development is mature enough that it actually serves the company better to get product development in a rhythm of product releases, and have the
Mm-hmm.
company be more dominated by production-oriented people. And at that point, you have to step down, let production-oriented people take that kick in, and take their word for it. And if they say no, you got to believe it. And so there, the founder has a special place to to allow for that. But as I said, I think the timing is really of essence, because I do also remember that already 3 years ago, we started off with building quality control procedures, even targeting like ISO certificates. In hindsight, we were early with that. We killed
Mm-hmm.
these projects and we restarted them recently, um, because 3 years ago, product development was not mature enough. And that was a wasted effort. And then you feel that also as a manager, right? Then you're trying to push a process that doesn't fit.
Okay, that's interesting. Um, if I elaborate on this, would it, so do I understand you correctly that if you would be able, say, to go back in time a little bit and then change something, tweak something, so now you would have a better result with the power of hindsight. Now, would that be what you would change? Say, okay, we need to get our COO earlier, or would it be something else?
Oh man,
Uh,
there'd be 100 things that I'd change. I mean, I've
okay,
been
but
here
again,
with, we made a
follow the
hundred
Pareto
mistakes.
principle.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought about it going into this conversation. So what do I see are really like the biggest mistakes that we've made in scaling this company? For, for me, so when I reflected on it, for me, the thing that stood out more, it is expectation management and communications about expectation management. Because again, how do you build a startup? It's by selling a dream. How do you raise funds? It's by selling a dream. It's not by selling caution and selling risks. And I mean, I'm only partly embarrassed to say that, hey, we have faced delays in execution at LeydenJar. We have faced cost overruns. Um, and I think that all of them were part of a necessary trajectory for us to get where we are, to take the learnings both on the organizational side, but most definitely also on the technological side, because it's really difficult, right, to manage expectations when the tech isn't done and you don't really know where you are, and if there are still any unknown unknowns in the tech roadmap. There and these unknown unknowns, I mean, they can be out of the R&D roadmap, but then in the product development roadmap or in the yield control roadmap. And some of these bears on the road, they only start surfacing terribly late. So it's
Yes.
really, really, really difficult to then tell a consistent story to the outside world. For example, we only 2 weeks ago, we released a press release stating that we had demonstrated 500 cycles without any external pressure, which is for buffs in the battery industry. We feel this is a big deal. Um, the first time that we realized this result was already 2 years ago. But at that point, it was a one-off cell. And we didn't realize how damn tricky it is to make 100 cells that all hit this performance milestone. And that R&D results are full of flukes. And that you
Mhm.
get a hero cell that's not reproducible for no real good reason. So also there we had to learn that, hey, You have one time for the result in the lab. Don't communicate it. Be cautious. Stay where you are. And only once you've demonstrated it 100 times, once you have already sent it out to clients in their third-party labs have been able to validate these results, only then you start writing the press release. Um, and it took us some, I would say, yeah, no, we've made mistakes in that. That's for sure.
Well, thank you very much for this because you're not the first Dutch person I'm interviewing in this podcast, and from my experience, anyway, it's you can always count on the Dutch person to give you a straight answer. Thanks for that. So we kind of have to close soon as we're running out of time. So just one last question, which I always ask all of my guests, because you've been already on that road for some time. So you've been scaling up. You had your problems, setbacks, whatnot. With that experience that you accumulated, what would you recommend the green tech startups who are just starting to grow, who are just leaving the lab, what they should watch out for? I mean, of course, there's 100 things, but from from the height of your experience, what should they like the main thing they look out?
I'm pressed for an answer. I would say client engagement. Start with that early as possible, and it's really doable. So if you are developing a product that matters, then you should be able to find early adapters at big corporates that are willing to go to take this journey alongside of you. And they will not be purchasing big volumes of it, but only engaging with these people, jump on monthly calls with these people, is so incredibly valuable, because what everybody ends up doing is developing a product with the wrong specs. And we've done it multiple times. We've pivoted to developing products with alternative specs, but the only way to mitigate this zigzagging product development roadmap is to have early and often client feedback. And I think one of the reasons why we love working with automotive OEMs, or with big consumer tech OEMs, is because they got big tech scouting teams, and they got even bigger product development teams and manufacturing teams. So as you mature, you can graduate from tech scouting to R&D to product development to procurement, and you can grow, and learn as you develop. So from the tech scouting people, you learn how to benchmark your technology against other technologies out there, and you learn what are the specs that you actually need to develop, instead of believing that you understand the specs that you develop. Then from the R&D people, you understand how to achieve these specs, and then from the product people, you understand how to really get that in a product, and so that's super valuable. And don't do it with one client, do it with 5, because you're gonna go through the phases, because you're engaging super early, right? Your product's not done.
Mhm.
But these early, yeah, for us, it's just been pivotal, these early engagements with big corporates.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Yud, for these insights. And I found it super interesting and um, insightful, because not always you can you can get someone from a startup who is actually he's not a startup anymore to some extent as it scales up and becomes a full-time manufacturing company. So thank you very much for the insight, and good luck with your first of a kind project. And yeah, hope to see your batteries soon in
Yeah. Hey,
either
thanks for
watches.
having us. We enjoyed it.
Okay. Thank you very much, David. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye bye.